Hello and welcome to another Infinity N5 battle report for ITS-17. This will be a re-upload due to audio problems with my first video, so hopefully everything works smoothly for this one. I participated in a tournament called Hoplite Havoc 5 hosted by Outpost, which is a gaming club in Perth. 8 players attended the event and I finished last place. So this is my first list. This list is called Merger and Acquisition, and this is a combination of the two lists that I've previously run for my list 1 and 2 for previous tournaments this year, and I decided to take the best 5 teams and aspects from it and put it into one list. So I think this is my most favorite competitive ITS list for myself and my playstyle. It has everything I need in it, and it allows me to complete the objectives comfortably. So here at the top in Group 1 we have a Order Sergeant Harris consisting of Brother Konstantinos, who counts as an Order Sergeant, an Infirmera who also counts as an Order Sergeant, and a Black Friar with Thunderbolt +1 burst. So this is a level 2 Harris, giving the Black Friar the extra special die for when he goes onto the attack. And I prefer the Black Friar over the Crozier HMG because it is the same points cost, however it is 0 SWC, and it has an MSV2, 6th Sense, 2 armor, medium infantry, and is a bit more of a robust trooper than the Crozier. Next I have a core Crusader fire team consisting of Deferson as the lieutenant with the Spitfire, so he's basically an all-round multi-tool. The Knight Hospitaller with boarding shotgun and emitter, because I need EM in this edition just due to the amount of tags and weaponry that is available. And also sometimes hacking doesn't always succeed, and it's really only good against some things, not everything, and having an emitter still enables me to put light infantry and medium infantry into isolated state so they cannot do any attack runs or even warbands and skirmishes. It sort of nullifies them to a degree, so EM weaponry is quite strong this edition. And to round out the 3-person core is a Hospitaller with Tinbot Firewall -3, just to give the Knights extra protection and to give Deferson protection from Trinity and hacking attacks. Rounding out Group 1 we have 2 Trinitarian Forward Observer mine layers. One has a deployable repeater and the other one has a shock mine. In my previous lists I had both of them as deployable repeaters, and that was just to help extend the hacking network in deployment phase. But I found while it's good to have a hacking network, opponents with light, medium infantry, skirmishes and warbands can still pass through. And even though I can spotlight them to help negate some of the mimetism on these troopers, I do not generally incorporate a guided missile bot into my lists, and so I found them to be not as effective. So I thought I'll have one that is a mine layer shock mine, and so I'm sort of covering both bases. I have the deployable repeater to set up a hacking network against my opponent's obvious threats such as tags, vehicles and heavy infantry or remotes, and then I have the mine layer to help discourage light, medium infantry, skirmishes and warbands coming through into the midfield. In Group 2 I have a duo, which is a military orders duo consisting of the Crozier mine layer multi-sniper rifle with EM mine, and that is another cheap sniper which has been quite reliable in the past, and that EM mine just helps provide better protection to the deployment zone. And it's in a duo with the Knight Commander chain of command, because the Knight Commander counts as a Crozier, and having chain of command helps negate the loss of Deferson because he is an active lieutenant. Filling out Group 2 I have a Curator with deployable cover and AP mines, and a Crusader with multi-rifle light flamethrower. So the Curator, I've been recently trying to test the deployable cover using the Vitrofoam, and it has been quite successful. So we'll see how it goes for this tournament. And the Crusader is just another trooper off the board that is there to counter anything that my opponent brings up that can be a problem that I cannot achieve with what I can with Group 1. My second list is a thematic list, And I took inspiration from Infinity, the Dante's video about making themed lists, because I already created one list and I was planning to run it as a one list tournament, and I thought, no, I'll do two because one of the missions is cutthroat, so I'll focus on something thematic and fun and see how we go. So I decided to use, because I do have the Knight Hospitaller, the Military Orders Crusade pack. So I thought, why not just put all the knights in it and have Joan in there as well. And with this list, it was basically a Crusade force from the Knights going into Shinju. So it's a full fight, well, it's a full complement of miniatures from the Crusade pack with some support. However, with this list, there's no fire teams, as you can see. I mean, there is a fire team, it's there, it's a 5-person core fire team for the Crusade fire team, but I decided to run it as independents because I want to understand and utilize the inspiring leadership skill that Joan of Arc brings, and just to see how I can make that useful. So obviously we have the Joan of Arc as the lieutenant with the multi-rifle and Pulsar +1 burst. We have the Knight Hospitaller HMG, boarding shotgun emitter. We have a forward deployment 8 inches Hospitaller with a boarding shotgun and contender, and coming up against Fiddler with a contender is really painful, especially for my heavy infantry. So I thought maybe I can have something to go against my opponent's heavy infantry as well. And then rounding that out, one of them will be proxied as the Knight of Justice with the multi-marksman rifle, picture decharges, and he has a hacking device. Because I've always found him, because I'm lacking hacking support and repeaters, I thought having the Knight of Justice just to fill out that fire team just gives me the option to hack if I need to. And the pictures always are quite reliable on BS14. So that's my reason, that's my mechanism of negating the Trinitarian deployable repeaters. I have a Knight of Montesa Paramedic FTO version because everyone seems to be raving about the Blitzen and the +1 special dice. So I thought I'd give that a run. I have a Crozier combi rifle Blitzen as a backup Blitzen arrow piece, and that was the points that I could spare for something of usefulness in this list. I have the Curator with the deployable cover again, with a Powerbot, and the Powerbot is just spread to help push forward and remove any isolated and immobilized B states from the heavy infantry. I have the Teutonic Knight BS Attack -3 missile launcher and wanted to give this a run. So my thinking with this is because the Teutonic Knight has limited cover and does not gain or does not give my opponent a -3 modifier to their ballistic attack, and combined with the deployable cover, which also gives 6+ armor but does not allow the -3 to my opponent's ballistic skill, I thought, why not just add the deployable cover to the Teutonic Knight and just make it a really hard arrow piece. So the Vitrofoam gives +6 to armor save. The Teutonic Knight has 3, so that makes it +9 to the weapon's PS, which when you look at a sniper rifle, a weapon with PS5, is 14 or less on armor saves on the saving roll. So I thought that is quite a useful design, and it's not negating anything in any way, because if I had a trooper, say the Crozier multi-sniper rifle behind deployable cover, depending on where the trooper is situated, I can still choose to use the normal partial cover and allow my opponent to have the -3 mod, but then I'm not allowed to use the +6 from the Vitrofoam. Whereas with the Teutonic Knight, he does not qualify for the -3 ballistic skill, so why not just pair it up with the Vitrofoam and just make it a hard arrow piece. So I wanted to give that a run. And rounding out in group 2 is the Mulebot Evo Hacker, and he is just there to provide firewall to all the knights because they are spread out and have no protection from hacking attacks. And he's also to provide combat jump or combat support. I think it's called combat jump, or sorry, support jump to my Crusader, the Forward Observer, which will come in and do some classifieds, do some mission objectives, or just deal with any threats my opponent brings up. So those are my 2 lists for this tournament. The first mission is Cutthroat, and I planned on using the thematic list for this one, the Crusade fire team list, or the Crusade no fire team list. So my plan was, if I had first turn, to maximise causing as much damage to my opponent as I can, and if having the second turn, to deploy deep in my deployment zone and force my opponent to come to me, And after some consideration of this before the tournament, I thought, even if I was to be aggressive, why not just huddle up in the back of my deployment zone and just use my forward attacking troopers, such as the Knight Hospitaller with forward deployment +8 and the Crusader, and just sink orders into them round one and just cause as much damage as I can, because even if I was to have first turn, I could utilize that, and then my opponent has to step out and come towards me and cross much more of the field. So that was my plan for Cutthroat. The second mission is Corporate Appropriation. For this, and in previous games, my plan is to quickly capture my opponent's prototype and move it as far as possible into my deployment zone, and then set up protection around it. And then have the opportunity of using my Crusader or the alternative Trinitarian to push forward and destroy my prototype. And if I have the luxury of time and orders, just to complete some classifieds. Last game is Uplink Center, and basically everything scores at the end of the round, at the end of the game. So the plan was to just, if I have first turn, go and activate the antennas and just hold them, and then come back and control them later, or failing that, or having second turn just to try and accomplish things in the very last round. And now for the games. So game 1 was Cutthroat. Here is the deployment zone. Did I deploy first? I cannot remember. But this is my deployment zone. On the left, I had the Evo Hackabot. Here in the midfield, on the roof, I had the Curator with deployable cover, the Teutonic Knight missile launcher, and down the bottom here, the Crozier with Blitzen. And inside this building, because I had pretty much most of my important troopers in it, Joan here, who is my lieutenant, with the Palbot from the Curator, the Hospitaller with emitter boarding shotgun and stairwell, having line of fire out through here and this doorway. I had the Knight of Montesa here, just looking back into the room. I had the Knight of Justice down here, covering down pretty much all through here. My Hospitaller HMG on the corner, covering down basically from out there all the way around to there. And that was because my opponent, who was playing Steel Phalanx, had Hippolyta, Phoenix, and a Myrmidon officer, Harris, just hiding around here. Scylla here is actually inside the bottom floor, but we just kept her on the roof for ease of playing, not having to remove roofs and buildings and stuff. But she didn't go anywhere, she just sat there with her little Davabot in the corner, tucked up in the corner here. We had her, he had another Harris fire team in this building with a lieutenant. I can't remember the troopers exactly. And I think that's the Walker on the roof. And then his reserve drop was Andronima, which was here and made her his Cheops. And my reserve drop was the Hospitaller for deployment, which was my Cheops. Now, I probably should have actually deployed it over here and then just done a run up in through here. But I thought, no, let's have some fun. I was watching the week before the Lost Lieutenant podcast about the Art of the Fork, and Andromeda was obviously featured in that. So I thought, I'll put my knight down here and let's just play it out how it goes. So for the game, from memory, there was a lot of face-to-face battles between Andronima and the Hospitaller, and I think it took about 3 or 4, maybe 5 orders to finally put my knight down, because my armor saves are very good this game. And eventually he died, and that just soaked up a lot of orders for Andromeda. And then he decided to move her around, but because I put this guy on suppressive fire, he had good lines there, so he had to cancel that attack run. And my opponent, he normally said when he goes second, he has never seen the utility of suppressive fire, but he actually now sees the effect of it in this game, because I'm actually putting it on a trooper that is, deliberately deployed to do something, which is prevent fire and movement coming down there. Because normally he just spends the command token to remove 2 orders and doesn't consider suppressive fire a useful spend of a command token. But he actually appreciated the placement of the Knight of Justice and Suppressor Fire there down there, because that is within the Knight of Justice Suppressor Fire range. -3 out to about here, but still it's -3 to whatever Adronima does, and if she was dodging, it's -3 to her dodge, and it puts her at greater risk. So he realized that there actually is a usefulness for Suppressor Fire going second, and generally I find Suppressor Fire is good to help mitigate some sort of alpha strike, which is what my opponent tried to do. So he ended up moving Adronima all the way around here, taking out my HMG and just being a nuisance in general to the 3 knights inside the building here. And because we were playing shoot into and out of but not through, it was actually very hard to find angles. I did try to use my emitter to isolate her, but I failed the shot. Other key moments that occurred were placing smoke down with Hippolyta, and then allowing a hidden deployed Agima marksman to reveal himself and take out my Crozier, because that was to allow Adronima to move up through here. And then in my turn, obviously the smoke disappeared, but he revealed his Agima. So I put the deployable cover down here next to my Curator, and then I moved my Teutonic Knight up. Now I should have, in the first order, I should have dodged, but I moved and shot, and then obviously I was out in the open and exposed, and I took a wound for the Teutonic Knight, and then he finally ended up in cover here. Did another face-to-face roll with the Agima marksman, and ended up losing my Teutonic Knight because the armor save failed, despite having +6 on top of my 3 armor, which I think went down to 2 because it was AP, which would be 8 on top of 5, so which would be 13. I managed to just roll a 14, and I was like, there you go. For the rest of the game, there's a bit of backwards and forwards between all these guys here and Adronima. He did manage to call down some sort of combat drop trooper with a hacking device and come around here and take out my... I did lose Joan through isolation because Adronima has a zapper, and then my Knight of Justice was the lieutenant for the rest of the game, and then the Knight of Justice and this combat drop killer hacker, is it called Adronima? Anyway, I cannot remember. They had a bit of a battle out and ended up losing. No, I think they ended up killing it. Or was it a stalemate? Anyway, that was pretty much the main fight. That was really all that happened in this game, and it was quite fun. My opponent was was considered one of the better players in Western Australia over here for Infinity. So it was good to play against him and just see how he plays, and just good to play against some of the best, and helps learn from and improve my skills. So I had a bit of a discussion afterwards, and it was a good game. I really enjoyed this game. Game 2 was Corporate Appropriation. Again, I played against one of WA's more successful players. So here's the deployment. My opponent kept deployment for this, I remember, and he chose to have his side, and obviously this is my side he put me on and encouraged me to deploy first. So with that knowledge, I thought, okay, I better have first turn. So from here, from left to right, we have Deferson down here by the stairs. It wasn't the best place to put him, but I thought I could keep him away from most of the battlefield. We have the Knight with boarding shotgun emitter up here, providing a bit of an ARO presence around most of the top end of the board and down through here. And the Timbot hiding in the building here. Then I had the Curator with the deployable cover up here. The duo, so this is my first list, the merger and acquisition list. The Crozier multi-sniper rifle with his EM mine deployed just here to help cover anything coming down here. The Knight Commander here just facing the rear arc. In the center right, I had my Order Sergeant Harris with Konstantinos inside this building looking out the window down here. The Blackfriar +1 with Thunderbolt +1 burst is here, just out of line of fire of anything, but ready to push up and just shoot down whatever comes this way. And the Infirmary prone, just looking back, making sure if there's any drop troops you can at least shoot back with this combi rifle. The treasure token is here. My HVT is, so there's this helipad has 4 pillars. It's on this 4th pillar here, just outside line of fire, and there is a small narrow line of fire window along this table edge, which ends up being a detriment to me later on. I have a deplorable repeater here, and the Trinitarian is hiding here in hidden deployment. I have another MIM -3 token here, and I have a Trinitarian deployed here. So because my opponent had the benefit of keeping deployment and being forced to go second, he chose the one on his right, the prototype on the right, as his, and the one on the left as mine. So this was probably better for him to move up to because there's more cover protecting him, where it's quite open on this side of the table. But that's okay, because my plan was to use Konstantinos to drop a disco baller here to cover just the prototype and most of that open field, then use my Trinitarian to touch it and bring it back, hopefully down around through here. Kind of worked, not quite, but I'll talk about it in the next slide. Oh, sorry, and before I forget, my classifieds were all HVTs, because I thought, why not? Everything in my list can achieve that. So it was HVT follow-up, HVT kidnapping, and HVT designation. So with that, my opponent's HVT was behind this building here, just on the back end. But unfortunately, I could not reach it, so I didn't even bother considering my classifieds. So going first, my plan was to put down a disco ball field here, which I did. However, this camo token up here, which was one of his Delamis, revealed, so a bit of a shootout there. Lost Konstantinos. The Infirmary came in, resurrected him, and then Konstantinos then placed the disco ball there, and then my Trinitarian came out, collected it, and ran back down into this building here, just inside the window. And when you hold a prototype, you cannot do move as the second skill. You can do dodge, but what I did was I placed a camo token here and a camo token outside the window. So I had 3 mines in this area on the right over here to protect anything from coming down, and my opponent had the Zyback flyer, so that was really discouraging a lot of movement. So I was actually very happy with that setup and achieved the mission, but I should not have taken out that Delami first. I should have just placed the disco baller and then worried about pushing my Trinitarian back as far as I can, maybe even back down to here or even to this building, and then reconstituted Konstantinos. So with that, my opponent went and had his turn. He pushed up a couple of Matawas, the ones with jammer, and positioned himself to up here. Oh, sorry, his reserve drop was a Magariba guard down here. So Magariba guard went around down this very small line of fire. Unfortunately, killed the first one. Luckily, I had chain of command, and then moved the Magariba guard up here. And my emitter guy put him in isolated and immobilized B. However, he had a Matawa here, and he dropped down 2 speedballs, both which ended up being the switch on, and ended up cancelling the state. So that took a few orders, and then ended up pushing forward, grabbing his prototype and running it down here. After that, and it took quite a few orders actually for the Magariba guard and this guy to fight it out, and eventually I think like the 3rd order from my opponent put him in brick state, and then obviously once he cancelled that, bit more of a fight out, I eventually lost my Knight Hospitaller, but that was sort of the end of his turn. My next turn, I pushed the Trinitarian here back further into this corner and just had it facing that way and prone, just so nothing would happen. Shuffled around this Order Sergeant fire team a bit, just to add a bit more covering fire, and tried to take out some of his camo triggers. because all of his Dalami were in Group 2, which were there to fuel the Maghreba Guard, and because he had Saladin, basically had a lot of regular orders to just push that Maghreba Guard up. So in his turn, the Maghreba Guard basically came around here. Oh, he did deploy some mines somewhere. Yeah, I think there's some mines placed somewhere to annoy this fire team, but because Constantinos had to deactivate it, he just deactivated it through the wall and bam, not a problem. But anyway, the Maghreba Guard went up and just placed some mines along the way and just took out my Trinitarian. So I no longer captured his in my deployment zone. And then I tried to land my Crusader to come around here and take out his, but my Crusader failed, so I ended up failed the combat jump. So I ended up putting it here, and I tried to move it around to take out the Zyback, but was killed by Panzerfaust from another Dalami. And that was pretty much the game. Oh, and you know, my opponent completed a few classifieds as well during that last round, so that gave him the edge. And yeah, just fortuitous circumstances allowed him to score well for this game. And it was a fun game too, playing against another one of the top players in Western Australia, and just seeing how he played the game. And afterwards, we had a chat. He said nothing went wrong in terms of my strategy, just dice rolls were bad, and that was about it. Final game for the tournament was Uplink Centre. Now this photo was taken towards the end of my first round, so the troopers in the middle should not be there. So this core fire team was actually spread around here, and then I moved them up. I had a Trinitarian hidden deployed on the roof here with a deployable repeater here, just covering the tech coffin, and had another Trinitarian just on my side but not touching the antenna here with the mine there. I had my Crozier sniper up here, and that's his EM mine down there, and there's the Knight Commander hidden, and basically he just had a good line of fire all across my opponent's rooftops. Had the Order Sergeant fire team down here, and the Crusader one was here. And then basically just used the sniper to be an annoying arrow piece and to set up as best I could defensively. And my opponent was playing Kestrel, so he had, this turned out to be Yamabushi, this was a Jackal, obviously this one is revealed during the game. He had a Hetkari in a fire team with a Forward Observer bot. This was by Pandra and a Griffin HMG. He had a Griffin Fuhrerbuck and 3 Fennec Fusiliers down here. He had his, I think it's a Banshee that was deployed here with a killer hacking device. And I think that's everything. I think maybe like a Flash Pulse bot here and a Warcore somewhere. So that's basically his setup. So quite a lot of threats there with the 2 Griffins and the Hetkari and the 3 camo tokens in the midfield. So for the game, the sniper was taken out. Can't remember. Anyway, I ran up the Trinitarian to place the deployable here, and that put the Hetkari and the remote there, and failed to do anything to the Hetkari, so I thought I'd try against the remote. Ended up bricking his Forward Observer bot, which now made his fire team less order efficient. I dropped in my Crusader down here and then took out his Flash Pulse bot there. There wasn't much else that was happening, so I pushed these guys up here respectively and just tried to hold the midfield. I wanted to climb up the stairs already, but I just could not do it, and he had the Griffin with HMG looking down there, so I just, this is sort of end of my turn, just set him up here in the midfield, just line of fire up there, and across there. And then my opponent pushed forward, did what damage he could, which was very little, moved his Banshee around up here a bit, but I had, let me just put that up. So he moved his Banshee up behind this vehicle and had a line of fire there. but I think I had Konstantinos take a few shots there and put him back in. Then I moved my Black Friar up to this corner, just to be a nuisance because he has albedo -6, and that will make the firefight between the Griffin HMG here bad. Pushed Konstantinos up, activated this antenna, and then pushed him back here, and I think I put him on Suppressor. And then this fire team in the middle, the core, went up through here. Had one here. I put the lieutenant. No, I think my lieutenant died from the Griffin, and then I pushed the doctor up here, but he ended up dying from the Hetkari because he had just enough line of fire to see him climbing up the stairs before finishing there. So I failed the dodge. No, did I fail the dodge? No, I think I just decided to whiff it and ended up dying. So I ended up just dying touching the tech coffin, so that was a bit annoying. I probably should have dodged, but then I would have ran out of orders there anyway. And then eventually my opponent just pushed forward I pushed my Trinitarian here to activate this one, but then he pushed forward with his Jackal and stuff and the Griffin fire team, and they sort of fought it out and then killed my Trinitarian, and then activated this console on the right. Ended up dealing with Konstantinos because the Hektari was up here shooting down there, and then the Banshee came around and activated this one, and so these two were both activated and touched, and then this trooper here, what's it called, Jackal, just walked into silver contact there, and that was my opponent's end game. So yeah, very tough game this one. Not a lot of shooting, just a lot of trying to maneuver and stay out of each other's fire lanes. But well played to my opponent. He had enough orders at the end to achieve his objectives. And that is the end of the games for the tournament. Now for the after action review. So here are the results for Cutthroat. I scored 1 objective point while my opponent scored 10 objective points. Now for the remainder of this video, I do not remember the army points recorded. I know they were recorded in Corvus Sphere, and when I went back into it a week later, you can only see the objective points. So I've only put in the objective points while I was creating this video. So it was a tough, brutal game from my opponent. Andromeda did a lot of work and pretty much scored all of those objective points. For corporate appropriation, I scored nothing, and my opponent scored 7 objective points. Those 2 classifieds that he completed were very helpful to him, and all my classifieds were, as you can remember, HVT ones, and I just could not reach that HVT, my opponent's HVT. So well played to my opponent. It was I actually enjoyed this game. It was a very good game. And finally, for Uplink Sitter, I did not take this one as seriously, and I just thought I'd have a bit of fun. But I did the best I could to play the mission. But my opponent just had the orders remaining to push me off the antennas and take out a win, a solid 8-0 win. Active Lieutenant. I cannot remember if I did have one at the end. Anyway, it would not have made a difference if I'd won 2 objective points in total, because I was still at the bottom. So that was a good game. That was a fun game. Coming up against Kestrel, a different way my opponent played it compared to one of the other guys that played with Kestrel. Definitely had a lot of HI floating around and had a lot of orders, and definitely utilised them to his advantage. So well played to all my opponents for this mission. For this tournament. So what did I learn? One thing that I had a question of after the tournament was the placement of my opponent's camouflage tokens for his troopers. So I went back through the rules, and I remember a rule about not placing anything within the zone of control of a camouflage marker. And I wasn't sure if this applied to troopers as well. So looking through the rules, the only restriction I could find was that only deployable pieces of weapons or equipment cannot be placed if there is a camo token within its trigger zone or trigger area. And there's nothing to say the same thing about troopers. And so it seems that troopers with camouflage can be within each other's zone of control. Because in military orders, it's pretty easy to know what the min-6 troopers are, because mines have min-3. And so, yeah, he obviously knew that those min-6 camo tokens were Trinitarians, and that's fair enough. Like, after playing the game, you do notice who has what, such as Dalami. They're just a camouflage trooper with no min, and obviously they're forward on the high ground, so you know, okay, that's going to be a trooper. So yeah, I don't think there's any restriction for camouflage troopers to be placed within the zone of control of enemy camouflage troopers. It only applies to deployable pieces of equipment and weapons. So my opponent's camouflage tokens, which were his Jackal and Yamabushi, are legally able to be placed where he placed them in the midfield. Just something to think about some more, and obviously this demonstrated itself again in the tournament. Whilst having first turn, it does allow a player to take advantage of completing the mission first, and the player having second turn for deployment can set up his army to mitigate the first player's troop movement. So this just reinforces my experience that deployment is probably the stronger items out of the lieutenant's role. Because when you deploy first, you really have no idea what your opponent's going to put down. And so you have to deploy in a way to prevent anything that he may offer and set yourself up to run forward and try and complete the mission first. Whereas when you're deploying second, you can set up in a way to help mitigate any sort of Alpha Strike attacks and also mitigate your opponent from moving into any areas by having your AROs effectively placed and placing mines in areas that you know he will most likely move into. So that has solidified my knowledge now, and I'm quite sure that deploying first is definitely a disadvantage, and deploying second is a stronger advantage. However, deploying first means you generally will take the first turn. So you really have to be prepared to mitigate anything your opponent will set up. And thirdly, I really wanted to understand inspiring leadership, and I do need more practice with it to make Joan of Arc work within military orders. And I think now it probably will not hurt to have Joan in a fire team, and then if I need to break her out to do a coordinated order with various other troopers, most likely skirmishers, to help move them up to objectives or to help place deployables. Maybe not so much just use the rest of the fire team. If I was to use the fire team, it would probably be to break them all out and then just do a coordinated order and put them all into suppression and just hold my fire team in the midfield somewhere, covering that objective and just being a brick wall to my opponent. And if I chose not to do that, I could use Breakout Joan, as long as she's not the team leader. Let's just say the fire team moves up with the HMG as the team lead, and then the next order, which is say the second last or last order, I use Joan's lieutenant order. I can break her out of the fire team. She's still within zone of control of the team leader, but she's broken out of the fire team, and then set everyone up, move the Trinitarians around if I need to, or other troopers, or even just do that, and then cancel. Well, yeah, because she's not in suppressive state, like if I'm just moving people around to complete objectives and push buttons in the last order of the round, then yes, because in the states phase, she automatically rejoins the fire team. Or if it was to be putting on suppressive fire, I'll break up that core fire team, not use the lieutenant, so make the lieutenant the boarding shotgun emitter for the last order, like regular order, move, and just shuffle them around in position to put them in good cover. And then use Joan to break out and put everyone in the fire team on suppressive fire with the HMG, the Doctor, and Joan, and maybe one other. And that way, everything's a bit covered. And obviously, that's a bit of a brick for my opponent, a hard wall to come up against. And in the states phase, well, depending on the ARO situation, if I'll make them all lose their suppressor fire, because they're all within zone of control of the fire team leader, they can all rejoin back. I'll have to look in the rules a bit more and play that, but I'm definitely keen to see how that works and run it out a bit more. This is the end of the battle report. Thank you for watching, and for me taking your time to do all this. And I do enjoy making these videos for everyone and showing my mistakes and faults, and hopefully it's a learning point for everyone as well. So please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, what you thought about the game. Always happy to listen to your comments and see how you play military orders, or just how to play Infinity in general. I do read the comments, just not always on the time. And with that, thank you for watching, and as always, the dice decide the outcome.